question. I have zoysia. I've got two different kinds. I've got the old Empire and I've got the new Floritam or whatever,
Okay.
University of West Florida. Now I see a distinct difference in the texture. How high are you, or how low are you supposed to mow those?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, there are different varieties of zoysia, and basically the difference is in the thickness of the grass blade. Some have a finer, skinnier grass blade, and some have a thicker grass blade. The thicker ones look more like almost like centipede, and the thinner ones look more like kind of Bermuda. But as far as an ideal mowing height for zoysia, about 2 inches would be a good height for both of those varieties. That would probably be a good happy medium. There's other more exotic varieties of zoysia that they use on golf courses that can be mowed really low, but for a residential lawn.
But it doesn't hurt to leave them a little longer.
No.
Because
No.
my yard man curses me up and down because it's hard to cut. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Right.
he prefers to leave it a little taller. So he just trims off the top. So I'm not going to hurt it by.
No, you're not going to hurt it by leaving it longer. So, and as while we're talking about it, let's just talk about mowing heights for a moment and talk about why mowing heights are important to grass. Okay, so the way the grass plant works is the blade, if you can picture the grass blade as a solar panel that collects light and energy, and it takes that energy down into the engine room, and it uses that energy to grow more grass blades and grow roots. Okay, so when you're mowing the grass, you're actually removing some of that solar panel, and you're removing some of the grass's ability to collect energy to do what it needs to do to multiply and grow and be healthy. That's okay up to a point. However, again, it kind of depends on the variety of grass, but generally speaking, if you're talking about centipede, St. Augustine, well, let's just talk about St. Augustine and centipede. If you're cutting off too much of that solar panel every time, you're inhibiting the grass's ability to absorb sunlight, which is energy, which it uses to grow roots and grow more foliage. Especially St. Augustine. St. Augustine should be left high. If you cut St. Augustine short all the time, the grass is going to decline. And the reason they recommend that you specifically St. Augustine be left higher, if you were to take a runner and just hold up a 1 foot section of runner of St. Augustine, and then hold up a 1 foot section runner of centipede, on that runner you're going to have so many grass blades on the St. Augustine runner and on the centipede runner. Well, there's going to be more grass blades on the centipede runner than on the St. Augustine runner. St. Augustine has fewer runners. The blades are spaced out farther on the runner than on the centipede, so it has overall fewer blades in it, so it needs more leaf surface to collect the same amount of light than, say, centipede does. Does that make sense? So that's why cutting it shorter is harder on St. Augustine than it is, say, on centipede. Centipede, 2 inches is a good mowing height for centipede. And for zoysia, 2 to 3 inches, anywhere in there. However, a longer, leaving it a little bit longer doesn't hurt, as long as it doesn't get so long it starts to thin out. I mean, that would be a situation where you just weren't mowing at all. But if you're doing regular routine maintenance, if you want to leave it a little higher, that it doesn't hurt it at all. Bermuda, you can cut a little bit shorter because it's denser. The leaf, the number of little blades and leaves on the runner is denser, so you can leave it a little. You can cut it shorter. It'll tolerate a shorter cut. It's a really good idea to keep your mower blade sharp throughout the growing season. Especially again with St. Augustine, because St. Augustine, the blade is a little thicker, a little wider. If the blade isn't sharp, when you go over St. Augustine, it's more like taking a club and just knocking off the top of the blade rather than taking a knife and slicing it off. So if you look at a St. Augustine grass blade that has been cut by a mower that has a dull blade, it'll look jagged and it'll be brown on the top. Same way with zoysia. Zoysia is the same way. You got to have a sharp grass blade or sharp mower blade to cut zoysia on, because it'll turn brown on the top and it'll kind of, you know, it just won't look very good. Plus, what it does is it leaves the grass, leaves that jagged edge, leaves the grass blade open for disease to come in and infiltrate that grass blade. So that, you know, that's some information on mowing. Any other questions at that time? Yes.
If you have centipede now and want to switch over to like zoysia, I've seen grass seed out there, or is it better to go in and just take everything out? Because I've heard the zoysia will just grow and then eventually kill all that out.
Yeah, good question. Okay, so if you have one kind of grass, you want to convert it over to another. What's the best way to do that? It kind of depends on what kind of grass you start with and what grass you want to convert to. The most common conversion is converting from, say, centipede to St. Augustine. That's a relatively easy conversion to make. And the easiest way to convert that without taking everything up is to just get some St. Augustine plugs and plug in the centipede, and the St. Augustine will eventually commingle with the centipede and kind of take over the centipede. Zoysia, however, isn't converted that easily. One of the things about zoysia, one of the characteristics about zoysia grass is it grows slowly. And I've had customers that try to do that conversion, and I had one that actually took not plugs but actually squares of zoysia sod and kind of checkerboarded his yard with this zoysia sod when he had centipede, and 3 years later you could still see the checkerboards. I mean, it just, you know, it didn't work very well because zoysia just grows really, really slow.
I beg to differ though. It does work, because I did a section of mine and I just used, that's why I said I've got the Empire and then I got the sod in another section. And putting what I did, I pretty much top dressed. I put the zoysia into and with fresh dirt, then had it a little higher than the centipede, completely covered the centipede with top dressing, and within a year it had filled in. And I put them about 10 inches apart.
Okay, all right, that's very good. And the difference there is the person I'm talking about didn't use any sand. All they did was just plant the sod in the middle of the centipede lawn. That would be the way to do it. Converting one yard to another, you know, it's relatively easy to convert centipede to St. Augustine by plugging. Zoysia doesn't work very good by plugging, other than, you know, I mean, if you do what she did and just top dress everything, with sand and put the new grass on top of the top dressing, that would work pretty well. Really, what you need to do in order to convert to, if you wanted to convert to zoysia grass, is if you didn't want to kill everything off, scrape it up and put down zoysia, which would be the best thing to do. Then just do what she recommended, a little at a time, just covering it with sand and doing it a section at a time. That would work. Seed, you mentioned seed. Seed is not a very viable option for establishing or doing anything with grass. You know, it's really a waste of time and money. I mean, there's two grasses that we grow here that seed is even available for. That's centipede and Bermuda. Centipede seed, you can get it to germinate, but you have to get just the right temperature and moisture conditions. It has to be really hot out, like in the 80s and 90s, and you have to keep it watered, and it may or may not germinate. And it's very expensive. I don't know, it's probably $40 a pound or more, I'm not sure, but it's expensive, and even if you do get it to germinate, it's going to take a long time for it to establish and turn into a yard. Bermuda is a little bit easier to get to establish from seed. but it's still, it's still not a surefire thing. Really, the best way to establish a lawn is with sod or plugs. And the thing I tell people, about establishing a lawn from seed, if you could do it reliably around here, then the builders would do it, because that would be the cheapest way. The cheapest way to get a yard established is with seed. If it could be done that way, then you would see builders doing it instead of buying sod. But it's just not a very, very reliable way to get grass to grow.
Time of year to put down sod?
Not really. How you can do it year round. If you do it in the winter, the sod that you get will be dormant, but that's okay. It'll still be alive. You can put it down. Just make sure it stays moist. During the winter, you only need to water it maybe once a week, if that, because you don't want to overwater it, because you can get a disease activity in the new sod if you overwater it during the winter. And so the best thing to do is just put it down. I had some sod that I put in my yard probably about November, December time frame. I haven't touched it as far as watering it or anything, and it's still doing well. I just looked at it the other day. And here, and then it'll probably start coming out of dormancy in the next few weeks, and it'll do fine. So you can install sod any time of year. If you choose to do it in the middle of the summer when it's really hot, that's when you just need to be very diligent about watering it. You'll need to water it probably twice a day in the middle of the summer if we're not getting any rain, just to keep it viable, to keep it from drying out and dying. But it can be established any time. You can lay it any time of year.
You are putting the sod down on sand, not good dirt or anything.
Yes. When I talk about laying sod, is putting it down on sand. Yeah. Here's another thing I get asked a lot. Well, if I resod, should I bring in a load of topsoil and put the topsoil down before I put the sod down? The University of Florida actually did studies to find out, well, is there really a long-term benefit from putting topsoil on top of sand? Do you get any kind of benefit from that? And what they found was all the good stuff in the topsoil actually fell down through the sand past the root zone within a matter of months. So there was no long-term benefit from using topsoil versus sand if you were going to put something down, a material down, before you put down grass. The other problem with using topsoil is that you many times introduce a lot more weed seeds into the lawn that you didn't have before. So really, and it's more expensive. I mean, it's not as readily available, and it's more expensive. So the best thing to do, if you're going to put down some kind of a material on the lawn before you put down sod, is just get a load of just fill sand. It's readily available around here. There's a sand pit right up here in Holly. It's $150 a load, about for an 18-yard load. So, and the fact it won't have any nutrition in it, but you can fix that with a bag of fertilizer. So don't worry about putting down soil that already has nutrition in it. You can put down sand and then add the nutrition later when you need it. Yes?
How thick do you put the sand?
Well, it kind of depends on what your purpose is. If you, this is another thing we run into a lot of times. How thick do you put the sand before you resod? If you have areas that have trees close by and there's a lot of root competition from the trees, then you want to build, put 2-3 inches of sand to cover that root competition, because we'll talk about this later. We'll talk about, there's when you're growing trees and grass in the same soil space, the grass always suffers because the trees will come in and take up the soil space and won't leave any room for the grass. So you want to put down 2 or 3 inches of sand on top of the root competition from the trees. If you don't have any and the sand is loose and there's no divots or areas you want to fill in or anything like that, then you really don't need to add any sand. It's not necessary. Okay? Yes, sir.
What about if you have areas where you've had disease or dead grass in there and it's bumpy in there?
You can top dress those areas with sand and fill in the divots. Well, if you're spreading it on top of grass that's still viable, you want to do it maybe about a half an inch. Rule of thumb is if the grass blades are sticking up through the top of the sand, then it's not thick enough to smother the grass, and the grass will grow up through the sand and on top of the sand and fill it in. Okay. Yes, ma'am?
I have large connected palms. I just have 2 of them. Do they have a bad root system that interrupts the grass?
No, palms generally, the roots on palms never get bigger than your finger. And it's just like spaghetti, you know, and they're not real fibrous, and they're not hardwood like oak trees or pine trees, and they usually don't cause problems competing with the grass.